You already know the moment when tension suddenly leaves your body. Your breathing slows. Your chest loosens. For a few seconds, there is nothing to resist and nowhere else you need to be. You feel safe. Scripture already gave that exact moment a name. A land flowing with milk and honey. Not a country you would ever need to travel to. A real, hidden energy already moving inside your own body. Say that out loud in a church and you will get a look. But your own body chemistry is not New Age. It is not a metaphor someone invented to sound deep. And it is not a coincidence built on an English pun. The core of it is checkable, sitting in the same textbooks doctors actually use. Something real is moving in you right now, whether you believe a word of this or not. By the end, you will feel the difference between reading that verse and recognizing it. You know the story around it even if you have never opened a Bible. Moses, the burning bush, Pharaoh, the sea splitting open. In the middle of all of that, God makes Israel one promise, over and over. Twice in Exodus chapter 3 alone, in the very same conversation at the burning bush. Again in chapter 33. And repeated through the years in the wilderness after that. Not victory, not gold, a land flowing with milk and honey. If a promise gets repeated that many times across that many years, in that many different moments of the story, it is worth asking what it actually meant and whether anyone ever checked. Here is the picture you were probably handed as a kid. A lush valley, rivers of milk running between green hills, jars of honey stacked at every table, a promised upgrade waiting at the end of the desert. Here's the actual geography. The land Israel was promised was a strip of dry hill country, rocky, hard to farm, fought over by every empire around it for 3,000 years. It was never Eden. It was never even easy. You could walk across the whole promised territory, north to south, in a matter of days on foot. It was never a resource-rich empire, and it never became one. Other nations kept fighting over it for centuries because it sat on the only land bridge between 3 continents, not because it was overflowing with anything a farmer would want. When the 12 spies scouted it, most came back afraid of walled cities and reported giants in the land. Fear delayed the arrival by 40 years. And when the people finally did get there, they did not find a paradise waiting with open arms. They found walled cities that did not want them, seasons of famine, decades of war. If God's big promise was really about the ground itself, it is a strange promise to keep. The dirt never once flowed with anything. 12 men walked that same land and came back with 2 different stories. 10 saw giants and impossible walls. 2 of them, remembered by name as Joshua and Caleb, looked at the exact same cities and said it was possible. The land had not changed between those 2 reports. Read inwardly, only the nervous system doing the looking had. The people even built a golden idol to worship while they were still waiting, because waiting on an outward promise nearly broke them. That impatience is itself a clue. You do not panic and build an idol while you wait for real estate. You panic like that when what you actually need is a feeling you cannot manufacture yourself on command. So picture the scene, honestly. 40 years walking through a desert, complaining about the food the entire way, picturing a nicer piece of real estate at the finish line. You get there, and it is just more work. That is not a broken promise. That is a clue that you were reading the promise wrong the whole time. This is the same move Bill Donahue built a career on. When a promise in the text does not match the facts on the ground, you do not throw out the promise. You ask what it was actually pointing at. He was reading the Bible as a map turned inward long before it was popular to say so out loud. That method is his. Where this particular promise actually points is what the rest of this video shows you, and what you get to check for yourself. So if milk and honey were never about geography, what were they about? Look at what the Bible actually does with those two words everywhere else, outside of Exodus, and a pattern starts to show up fast. Start with milk, not as a food, as a chemical event. When a mother nurses, or when anyone finally feels safe enough in someone's arms to fully soften, the body releases a real hormone called oxytocin. Doctors have known this for decades. It is not a theory. It sits in every basic textbook on human physiology, next to the facts nobody argues about. Oxytocin is what triggers what is clinically called the letdown reflex, the actual physical release of milk in a nursing mother's body. That is not a metaphor invented for a sermon. That is the literal medical name for it. Milk released, because the body finally registered safety and closeness. The same hormone drives labor itself, long before that first feeding. Synthetic versions of it are used in hospitals every day to start and strengthen contractions. Before milk ever reaches a child, this one chemical has already been at work for months, quietly, underneath everything else. Oxytocin does more than that single job. Researchers have also traced it to what some call the tend and befriend response. It is a completely different way the body handles stress than the fight or flight most people have heard of. Instead of bracing to run or fight, the body reaches for closeness, for another person, for touch. It is the same chemical behind trust, bonding, the wave of calm that comes over you when someone you love holds you and you finally stop bracing. You do not need to be a nursing parent to feel any of this. The same chemical rises during a long hug, holding hands with someone you trust, even a warm conversation with an old friend after a hard week. It is one hormone doing one job everywhere it shows up, making closeness register in the body as safety. Scripture even reaches for milk the same way outside of Exodus. The book of 1 Peter tells its readers to desire what it calls the sincere milk of the Word, the way a newborn desires it, so that they may grow. The very next line gives the reason to want it. Once you have tasted that the Lord is gracious. The sweetness and the softening were always meant to lead back to Him. Not milk as food. Milk as the thing that lets something small and struggling actually grow. Read that way. Milk was never just something you drink. It is the name for a real current your own body switches on the moment it decides it is safe enough to soften. None of this needed a stretch to find. It did not take a hidden word or a lucky coincidence in translation. It is settled biology, sitting right next to a settled verse, and the only thing missing this whole time was somebody willing to hold the two side by side. But milk is only half of what that land was promised to flow with. The Bible does not leave you guessing about the other half either. Honey shows up again and again in Scripture in a strange way. Not as food on a table, as something eaten on purpose, as a message. The prophet Ezekiel is handed a scroll and told to eat it. He says it tasted, in his own mouth, like honey. Centuries later, in Revelation, John is handed a small scroll and told the exact same thing, sweet in the mouth. The book of Psalms says God's own words are sweeter than honey, sweeter than the honeycomb itself, in two separate Psalms, 19 and 119. John even adds a detail worth noticing. The scroll was sweet in his mouth, but it turned his stomach bitter right after. Receiving a truth and living inside what it actually asks of you are two different moments. The sweetness lands first. The work comes right behind it. That is at least 3 separate writers, centuries apart, reaching for the exact same picture. Not bread, not wine, honey, and the act of eating it. When that many independent voices land on one image without comparing notes, it stops looking like a coincidence and starts looking like a pattern worth taking seriously. Here's the correspondence, read inwardly. Honey was never just a food either. It is the name for the sweetness your own body produces when a truth finally lands. When your nervous system stops treating the world like a threat and agrees for a moment to rest. That is not a guess either. There is a real nerve involved, the vagus nerve, running from your brainstem down through your throat, your heart, your gut. When it activates, your body drops into what physiologists actually call rest and digest, the direct opposite of fight or flight. Most of the signal traffic on that nerve does not even run the direction you would guess. The majority of its fibers, by most estimates, carry information up from your gut to your brain, not down. Your gut and your brain are in constant contact along that same line, which is why a settled stomach so often means a settled mind, and the other way around. Scientists sometimes call the nerve network living in your own gut the body's second brain, because it can act on its own, even when the signal from your head goes quiet. Most of the body's own serotonin is made right there in the gut, not in the brain. That gut serotonin mostly works locally rather than setting your mood by itself, but the point stands. This chemistry of calm was never only in your head. This is not only theoretical either. The strength of your vagus nerve's activity is what researchers call vagal tone. It shows up in the small, natural changes in your heart rate as you breathe, a number some fitness trackers now estimate for you automatically. You can watch your own body settling in real numbers, not only feel it and hope. Some older traditions went even further and described this inner sweetness as a kind of nectar the awakened body produces on its own. That is tradition, not science, and it is worth saying so plainly rather than dressing it up as proof. What the settled science actually gives you is enough on its own, a real nerve, a real state, and a very old book that keeps describing it as something sweet enough to eat. Look again at the exact wording of the promise. Not a land with milk and honey, a land flowing with them. The Hebrew word behind flowing in that phrase carries a direct sense of movement, a current, rather than something sitting still. That is a strange word to use for a static piece of ground. It stops being strange the moment you stop picturing dirt and start picturing a nervous system. Physiologists number it the 10th cranial nerve, and its own name in Latin simply means wandering, because unlike most nerves near the brain, it does not stay close to home. It runs from the base of your skull, down your neck, branching into your heart, your lungs, your stomach, your gut, touching almost every organ that changes the moment you finally calm down. It is one of the main reasons your heart rate can drop within a few slow breaths, a direct brake pedal wired in from the start, not something you have to build or earn. Milk and honey were never two different prizes. Read as one system, they are two currents running through the same calming response. Oxytocin softening you from one direction, the vagus nerve settling you from the other. Both are real, both are measurable, and both are running through you right now, whether you have ever thought about either one before today. That same nerve does even more than settle you. Research increasingly links that same current to how the body regulates its own defenses. Exodus is not even the only place these two words show up standing side by side. In the Song of Songs, one verse describes honey and milk sitting together under the tongue itself. Two separate books, written in completely different settings, both reaching for the same paired image in the same place in the body, the mouth, the very entry point where something sweet is received and taken in. This is the exact method Bill Donahue spent his career teaching, holding scripture and the body side by side to see where they map. This specific pairing, milk and honey, as a single calming response, is this video's reading for you to test. So, the land flowing with milk and honey was never a country Israel had to conquer with an army. It was a nervous system Israel, and you already carried the blueprint for. Here is where this stops being information and starts being something you can do right now. Your exhale is the switch. A slow breath out, longer than the breath in, tells that same wandering nerve directly that it is safe to stand down. 6 seconds in, 10 seconds out, repeated slowly for 2 or 3 minutes, is enough to start it working. Humming does the same job through a different door. That nerve runs straight through the muscles at the back of your throat, so a low, slow hum, or even just breathing out on a long, extended note, vibrates it directly. This is not a metaphor. It is mechanical. There is a third door, even faster than the first two. Cool water on your face, especially around your eyes and temples, triggers something physiologists call the dive reflex, an old automatic response that slows your heart rate on its own within seconds. It sounds too simple to be real. It is real, and it is the same nerve doing the work every time. Add warmth. A hand flat on your own chest or wrapped around the back of your own neck tells your body something close to what another person's touch would tell it. Add one honest thought of gratitude on top. One person or one moment you are genuinely thankful for, held for a few full breaths. None of these 4 alone will fix a hard year, and none of them are a substitute for real help when you actually need it. But stacked together, in the same few minutes, on purpose, they are the closest thing to a manual override this particular body ships with. No app required, no purchase, nothing to wait for in the mail. That combination, the long exhale, the low hum, the warmth, the gratitude, is not a vague spiritual suggestion. It is a direct, physical way to open both currents on purpose, anytime you choose to do it. None of this erases the ache that sent you looking for a promised land in the first place. It just relocates where the relief was always going to come from. Not a plane ticket, not a better year. A body you already carry that already knows how to do this the moment you give it permission. So here is the whole promise, put back together. The land flowing with milk and honey was never somewhere you had to travel to. It was never a diet, and it was never only a metaphor. It was a nervous system at rest and in connection. And you have been carrying both ingredients the entire time. You were never promised a location. You were promised your own body. If you want the exact instruction for switching that stillness on by command, there is a video built for exactly that. It is called Be Still and Know, is a brain instruction, and it picks up the instant this one ends.